Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Last time around, we talked about fantasy football quarterbacks that are at a fantasy crossroads. We weren't really sure where this year and beyond would take these players. Now let's do the same with running backs. And we'll get right to it with Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Pretty good poster boy for running backs that are at a crossroads because when Breece Hall burst onto the scene as a rookie in 2022, he looked excellent. Unfortunately, an ACL tear ended his season way too early. He looked really, really good, though. He rehabbed back, and then in 2023, when Aaron Rodgers went down with an Achilles, he kind of made the most of it still. Had a pretty good year, considering that team was dealing with Zach Wilson all year. He has about 1,500 total yards and 9 total touchdowns. Pretty good year. And last year was more of the same, really. I think people are fading Breece because Braylon Allen is on the scene. They've drafted quite a few running backs in the last few years in New York, so there's a little bit of apprehension there that the touches are going to start going away for Breece. And only a 4.2 yards per carry average last year, a little low, especially with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, because the thought was that Garrett Wilson and also Breece Hall would kind of see those elite numbers that we think they're capable of with Aaron Rodgers under center. And it just didn't really happen that way. He had a similar season to what he had in 2023 and probably what he would have had in 2022. So after rehabbing from a knee injury, I think this player has made the most of his situation in New York, given the fact that one of the last 2 years, he basically played with a backup quarterback. So this is a player that people are a little bit down on, but frankly, I like the numbers overall. They're not spectacular. We might not be looking at a top 5 or 6 running back in fantasy like we thought perhaps was possible when he started out as a rookie. But even that being said, this is a really good starter that I think has shown flashes of elite potential. He has had games where there wasn't much to work with in that Jets offense, and Breece Hall still had great games. So I think that there's still a lot of meat on the bone here for Breece Hall. A lot of people think he might be traded. There were rumors swirling around about that. And Braylon Allen, the rookie from last year out of Wisconsin, is there as well. He has his fans. I looked up his statistics and his metrics. I didn't see anything there that jumped out at me as special. So I'm not so sure that anyone is in a hurry to give Breece Hall a lot less touches. Also, being in his 4th year, they might have a plan to give him as many touches as possible. So, while there are a lot of question marks, Justin Fields at quarterback, some people think that's a good thing for running backs when they have running quarterbacks in front of them because it opens up space. Some people don't like it because those quarterbacks can take goal line touches and rushing yards in general. But I think Breece might be in line for another decent season out of value. If there's just too much noise with the other running backs in the room and Justin Fields is just not a positive factor in your mind, then you might want to fade Breece. But with all of the talk about him being a little lower on the rankings this year in general, I've just heard a lot of pessimism about this player. And while I don't think you're going to see that high-end season from this player, I still think there's a lot of room for a top 12 season. And at the very least, this is a high-end RB2. I don't really think you can lose here. If he falls any lower than where you expect him to be drafted, I would scoop him up immediately. But there are some factors to sift through here while you determine if this is someone that you want to hitch your wagon to this season. Next up on our list is Ken Walker, and you notice so far, these guys are definitely fantasy starters. I mean, theoretically, or at least on paper, there are 24 running backs that you can start every week in fantasy, more or less, depending on who's hurt and things like that. So Kenneth Walker is definitely one of those, along with Breece Hall. But what we want to figure out is there more to this player than what we've seen so far? Because we have another player here who has had strong seasons, but we've never had that blow-up elite season that we might be hoping for or that we might have seen in highlight reels. And then we have other competition in the backfield, so we're trying to figure out all these different factors, a new QB as well. This is mirroring Breece Hall's situation fairly closely in some respects. I think this is a player that might not have that elite capability that I think Breece Hall might still have in him, but Ken Walker is going to be an every week starter for you. It's just a matter of figuring out, is Zach Charbonnet a real threat to him? Is the upside there? And overall, Kenneth Walker is a player that I think is super talented. However, speed-wise, I don't see that extra gear that some players have that can just let them take it to the house at any moment. Ken Walker is certainly capable of that. He's done it in his career. But on a carry-by-carry basis, I don't know if it's quite there, the breakaway speed. But I think this player does pretty much everything else well. Catches the ball nicely. He had 46 catches last year, which was way more than he's had previously. That's about 15 catches more than he's used to. Now with a new coaching staff, you have to wonder if that number stays up at 40 to 50 catches or if we go back down to about 30. So that's going to be a determination based on what you think of Clint Kubiak's offense. I mean, he coached Alvin Kamara, who certainly catches his share of passes, but I think we can both agree that Ken Walker isn't quite Alvin Kamara, especially in the passing game. As far as Zach Charbonnet, I think this is a nice player who is a decent handcuff because he will step in if Walker gets hurt, and he will get touches if you have a rash of injuries and just need to throw someone in your lineup in a pinch. But I looked at the snap shares, and it just doesn't seem like anyone is interested in giving Zach Charbonnet a ton of touches if Ken Walker is healthy. When Ken Walker's healthy, it seems like he's looking at about 70% of the snaps, and that's enough to be a fantasy starter as long as you have a little bit of talent. Obviously, Ken Walker has more than a little bit of talent, so I don't think the snap share is going to change much unless this new coaching staff comes in and they just love Zach Charbonnet's game and hate Ken Walker's, and I find that hard to believe. Also, a player that's in a contract year. We have another one of those. So do you think that they're going to run this player into the ground because they might be letting him go? Do you think that they might be making room for other running backs because Zach Charbonnet is there? He's a capable player, and Damian Martinez was only a 7th-round pick. We'll make sure that he makes the team before we make any determinations about him, but I think he's a good player as well. A 7th-round pick in a loaded running back class that I still think could have went in the 4th or 5th round in most years. So factoring all that in, with Sam Darnold there, they did add a guard, thankfully, in the 1st round in Gray Zabel. They should be able to block a little better on the offensive line. It's been a while since they had a great run blocking group up front in the offensive line. We'll see if that changes this year. I'm a little skeptical. And let's be real, it just remains to be seen if Sam Darnold is for real now, or if he just had the benefit of working inside a really great offense in Minnesota, because he doesn't deal well with interior pressure. The Seahawks give up a lot of interior pressure. They have another guard to help with that now, but color me skeptical on Sam Darnold. I'm pulling for the guy, but I don't know if this is going to change much for Ken Walker. But if it does, I'm just worried it'll change something in the negative sense, because Sam Darnold has 1 year of proven starting quarterback ability, and that's not too comforting. So we'll see what happens there. Overall, I think Ken Walker lands pretty much where he has every year since he's come into the league. There's still room for growth, and being in a contract year, you never know. He might have a little bit of extra motivation, but there are other running backs waiting to get touches, even if I don't think they're super talented. Definitely not as talented as Ken Walker, but the situation has changed a lot, but in a lot of ways, it stayed exactly the same for Walker. So make that determination. Do you think these changes matter or don't they? And adjust his ranking accordingly. Next up on our list is Isaiah Pacheco from the Chiefs. And Pacheco had a really surprising rookie season for a 7th-round pick. Very nice RB2 season. Then 2023, he kind of puts it all together. Doesn't quite get into elite running back 1 territory, but a very reliable player that gets in the end zone fairly regularly and caught 44 passes in 2023. 2024, we have the broken leg, which kind of derails everything. He came back for a few games at the end of the year, but listen, you can't knock a guy for not running well 2 months after he broke his leg. At the NFL level, that's insane. So we're going to throw those games out, of course, and I think this is someone that, again, another contract year guy, low draft capital, which, right or wrong, is sometimes an indication that a guy could be more easily replaced. Again, whether you agree with that or not. And Pacheco, I think, is shown to be an excellent battering ram who can also catch the ball. He's way more versatile than I think anyone expected him to be. But again, we're looking for upside, and does he have it? And that's the big question. He's still going to be 1 year removed from a broken leg, and that's a super serious injury. Also, we haven't seen a 1,000-yard rushing season yet. Only 3 seasons on the field. There's no shame in that, really. He was never going to get a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, as a 7th-round pick. They were never going to give him that responsibility. He probably could have got there, though, if they realized what they had a little bit earlier. So the potential, I think, is there for 1,500 total yards, potentially, if everything went right for Pacheco. What we have to think about is, okay, we're in a great offense. This is a nice player who's clearly a starting NFL running back. What else is going on? Well, all of a sudden, the Chiefs do have a lot of good pass catchers. Rashee Rice is coming back from his own injury. Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce's kind of at the end of the road, but obviously he's still a threat. And then Hollywood Brown is coming back after missing the entire season, which he has his detractors, but he's certainly a starting NFL receiver. So there's a lot of people to throw the ball to where that might not have been the case in 2023 when Pacheco had 44 receptions. So we should probably adjust our expectations on those reception numbers, especially when, again, this is another 7th-round running back that might not matter, but it's something to pay attention to. They drafted Brashard Smith from SMU, who is a converted wide receiver. Smaller guy, very different player than Pacheco, but a lot of those passing downs, if Brashard Smith proves that he can pass protect, he can be relied on to catch the ball here and there, he could be the new passing threat from the backfield and take that work off of Pacheco. And it might be in the interest of keeping Pacheco fresh. We have to think about that too, because anytime a running back threatens to take touches away from a player, we usually view that as bad. And there's a reason for that. We want our players to get as many touches as possible. No one's disputing that. But with running backs, keeping guys fresh and keeping guys from being banged up is very valuable too. So you can determine if a player like Brashard Smith, if he makes the team and if he carves out a role, you can determine if that's good because Pacheco can stay a little fresher, or if you want those extra touches. Overall, I think it was encouraging that he was at least able to dress and give it a go towards the end of last year. I think that's an insane recovery time for this type of injury. The coaches and Pacheco himself admitted he didn't have as much weight on him in those last few games last year that he would have normally had he not been hurt. So he's packed on a few more good pounds of weight, according to Andy Reid. So he's basically back to his old playing weight. And I think we could see another 900-yard season to 1,000 yards with about 8 touchdowns, maybe a couple hundred receiving yards and a touchdown or two, very similar to what he did in 2023. I wouldn't be too worried about the other guys in the backfield. They do have Kareem Hunt still. He seems like he's about at the end of the road. I believe he's turning 31 soon. And then they have Elijah Mitchell, who I don't know where he disappeared to last year. He has a ton of injury issues. I don't know if he's much of a threat unless he just has the healthiest season he's had as a pro. So factoring all those things in, I think I would expect Pacheco to bounce back to normal. But if you think the injury was serious enough that it lingers, maybe he loses half a step, you might want to consider all those things, especially if he's not catching as many passes. And finally, our last running back at a fantasy crossroads is Travis Etienne. And I think this is a great example of how do you determine and what kind of calculus do you use to figure out when you're willing to draft players in fantasy. Travis Etienne has so many different factors that could determine whether he has a successful year or not. I think it's very difficult to pin down where you should draft this player. Tore his knee up before his NFL career really even started, and then has a great year in 2022, bounces back nicely, 5.1 yards per carry, over 1,400 total yards, only 5 touchdowns, but with a player who really just played his first year, you're thinking that a few more touchdowns come, and this is a top 12 running back. And in 2023, 1,000 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. Again, we're at about 1,500 yards now with 12 total TDs. So we're getting that extra push that we expected after 2022. 3.8 yards per carry, though, in 2023, which is a little bit concerning because he's relying a lot on volume. And 2024 comes along, and we see a similar yards per carry average, and his touches just plummet. Tank Bigsby comes on, who was a disaster in his rookie year in 2023, but all of a sudden he figures things out and emerges as someone the Jags can trust out of the backfield, running the ball and catching it. So all of a sudden, Travis Etienne's job is in danger when in 2023, he looked like a really nice starter that you could rely on for years to come. So what's going to happen now, especially now that a new coaching regime is there? They brought in Bashal Tutin in the 4th round. So not huge draft capital, but this is a player that's very fast. And they might be trying to mitigate some of Travis Etienne's shortcomings as a runner by drafting players that have a little bit more speed. LaQuint Allen from Syracuse is another running back they drafted. So if you count rookies, there's 4 guys in the mix now in Jacksonville, and Travis Etienne is coming off a bad season. So what do we make of this? He's in his 5th year, which he was a first-round pick, so we're looking at a contract year for him. Are the Jags going to run him into the ground, or is he going to fade into the background? You see a pattern here with these players, and I actually did not look at who was in a contract year or when and where they were drafted before I made this list, but it just so happens that all these running backs are going to come under fire in their last season before their new contract. Because as we know, teams just don't want to pay running backs usually. That's changing a little bit. But unless you're an elite player, teams are going to be loath to give you extra money as a running back. They'd rather just draft someone new. Also, again, it needs to be noted, Tank Bigsby was just simply better than him last year. 4.6 yards a carry compared to 3.7 is a huge difference. 7 more rushing touchdowns compared to 2. They obviously trusted him near the goal line more than Travis Etienne. He didn't catch very many passes, so I take that back from earlier. I was looking at the incorrect statistics. But this is a guy that you could envision the Jaguars moving in a direction where Tank is the early down guy and Bashal Tutin is the 3rd down guy. Now, of course, that could be the plan, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? So Travis Etienne is nowhere near dead here. I mean, he has a chance to earn a new contract with a new team that does want to give him a lot of touches. And he's going to have a chance to prove it this year. It's not like they're not going to give him the ball. Now, Tank Bigsby might end up being the main runner here. That is our main concern when we're figuring out where to draft Travis Etienne. This is going to be one of those players where you want to pay attention to the preseason games. Who comes out with the first team? Who's practicing with the first team? Is it Tank? Is it Travis Etienne? That'll determine a lot as far as where you want to put him in your rankings. You can also just kind of throw your hands up and say, I don't know what's happening with the Jags backfield this year. I'm going to take Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne, regardless of which one is lower on the list. I'll wait till someone drafts one of them and then take the other. That's fine too, because this is a hard backfield to figure out. So those are my running backs that I think are at a fantasy football crossroads. And one of the fun things about these exercises is I've never done this before, but it's funny that, like I said, I picked 4 guys that are in a contract year. And that contract year has become so important for these running backs. And it just goes to show that running backs that don't get re-signed immediately, you might want to raise an eyebrow. If they get an extension done, that means the team really, really believes in them, because a lot of teams just don't want to give money to these players. So if you don't play at an elite level, your contract situation is going to be up in the air in that last season, and it's going to be hard for fantasy managers to determine what kind of performance you're going to put in that final year, because contract years are big for any athlete, of course, but if they're trying to crowd your position with other players that can take the ball away from you, that's going to impact your fantasy stats. So factoring all that in, plus the team situation and everything else, is going to be interesting for these guys. Tell me what you think about these 4. I wasn't going to go into guys like Derrick Henry or Saquon. I mean, you know those guys are super talented, and if you think this is the year they tail off, then you're not going to draft them. If you're not worried about it, you're going to take them. So there's no point in discussing guys like that. But these guys, I think, are way more interesting, because these could be middle-of-the-pack RB2s, or they could be league winners for you. So let me know what you think of these players, and let me know if I sounded a little too high or a little too low on some of them. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So I'll talk to you guys next time.